C Change is an industry initiative set up by ULI in Europe to help our members and the wider real estate industry to speed up the process of decarbonization. C Change is really focused on the biggest hurdles for the industry to make progress on decarbonization. And to ensure that we were not interfering or duplicating other initiatives that were already happening, we started with an audit of all the major hurdles that prevent progress to be made across the industry on the decarbonization process. And that gave us a good overview also of what other industry associations were already doing in this field. We are convinced that we don't need to create anything new, just work with our members, see what's already there, distill the best practice from what's already being done, and then develop jointly with our members and the wider industry a common practice so that we can speed up the process. We asked our members what to focus on, and there were two overwhelming priorities. One was focused on building the business case and ensuring that now the cost of doing nothing is not included in real estate valuations. So there's a real disadvantage to be a first mover in this field. Why would you incorporate the costs of decarbonizations if others aren't? And the other big focus point was on the collaboration between owners and occupiers. Given where we are with the real estate industry, the collaboration between owners and occupiers has never been flawless in the past. But given that this is about bigger things than being competitive or have an advantage over others, we need to collaborate. One of the main priorities our members wanted us to focus on is building the business case for decarbonization, because that business case is currently not clear. There is no regulation in place that gets us to net zero. And normally that forms the base for valuers to then incorporate what needs to be done in real estate valuations. And as that doesn't exist, you basically don't see the cost of doing nothing now. And why would you be the first one to then incorporate it? Because it can put you at a competitive disadvantage. But as we can't afford to wait until the regulation is in place all across Europe. Our members asked us to kind of see what could be done to then speed up this process. And after consultation with members through interviews, workshops, roundtables, we explored the different options. And the common agreement was around delivering industry guidelines, how to assess transition risks and how to incorporate them in a real estate valuation. Companies internally can start doing this analysis. Many are already doing it, but all in their own way. And that doesn't help industry progress. Because what we see across the industry is we see two camps. One is the informed players and the other one is the non-informed. But to kind of tackle climate change, we need the whole industry to come on board. And therefore we need one common methodology to assess these transition risks. And that is exactly what the guidelines do. It's that common methodology to assess the risks, but also to disclose these risks. Because if we don't disclose that common assessment, we're not moving forward the industry. Now that we have the guidelines, the key focus is on how do we create the critical mass across the industry for them to be adopted and to make that real progress. And we see that as a collaborative process where still more work needs to be done to support the industry. For example, through creating practical tools for that common assessment, to work on case studies that we're currently initiating on how companies already use the guidelines to help demonstrate what the impact can be to others. What are the challenges they encountered? How did they overcome them? What has been the impact? And we want to do more on different types of real estate. Well, putting the price of carbon into a monetary amount is like putting it in a language that most real estate professionals understand and therefore can help the way companies think about decarbonization and act. And to better build the business case for decarbonization, it's important to incorporate all the different elements into assessing those transition risks. And that, for example, includes the cost of decarbonization. It includes the tenant voids to vacate the building when you need to do the works, but it also means putting a price on the emissions from the building. Within real estate, there are two important components of carbon emissions. One is related to the operational carbon emissions, included in using fossil fuel energy, for example, to heat the building or to cool the building. And the other big component is related to embodied carbon emissions, and that's included in the construction or redevelopment of a building, in the materials, the transport of those materials to the construction site, etc. And if you look at the whole life carbon, the life cycle of a building, the biggest part comes from the embodied carbon emissions, the materials, the transport, etc. So if we put a price on those operational and embodied carbon emissions, that really helps us to build the business case for retrofits, as it's such a big component. There are only relatively few real estate companies that use an internal carbon pricing. Also because an external carbon pricing through regulation is not applied yet for real estate. We see it in other industry sectors like aviation and transport, but it's not applied to real estate yet. We see it coming. We see already cities, for example, applying carbon taxes for buildings. We already see it applied on an EU level for different types of materials being implemented, but we don't see it applied generally yet to real estate across the whole sector. But to anticipate that, we need the industry to apply a carbon price, initially trying to address mostly the occupier challenges, and from that now building with a community of practice involving occupiers, landlords and service providers on distilling what those major issues are and start working through solutions and build on that, see what's already exists, see where we can scale them up and maybe tweak them, and jointly develop new solutions, prototype them, test them, and implement them across the industry.